Hi, I'm Sterling. Come on in. The water's dark, but it's probably fine. Thanks for joining me. This is the first chapter in an ongoing story about roads and the dark and parts unknown. It is titled, Jedediah is a Stranger. The road was quiet, and the forest was dark. Jedediah stood near the center of the road, and maybe the forest too. He didn't know. He didn't know where he was, and that troubled him, but not as much as the stars overhead, which were brilliant, beautiful, and wrong. Really, though, these were two sides of the same troubling coin. No place Jedediah knew of would have stars like that, all different colors, a few of them moving, but only just. Jedediah stood near the center and looked up, and heard noises in the underbrush, and turned to face whatever had made them. He was already afraid, but it surprised him how little his fear changed, to hear something tangible and to see a cat, long and sleek and gray. It crept out toward the road, but stopped short, one paw raised mid-stride, just short of coming down onto the strange swirled gravel pavement. Jed looked at the creature, then looked away, not wanting to seem aggressive. When he looked back, the cat held his gaze, and Jed held his breath. Because the cat was not a cat, not quite. Its nose was too broad, its lower jaw deep and pushed forward. Its legs were too long, making it stand a little too tall. Almost cat. Its eyes were orange and bright, and held his gaze. "What do you know, cat?" he asked. It flicked its tail and turned away. He watched it slink back into the underbrush. Jed sighed and looked down at his shoes. White, New Balance. Nice pair, or they had been. Stained now and worn. Lots of miles. He shouldered his pack and thought for the 1,000th time how lucky he was that this, whatever exactly this was, had happened on his way back from shopping for his latest trek. He hadn't starved. Yet. But he was running low on jerky and trail mix and freeze-dried meals. But at least his water filter was still working. That was the most important thing. God only knew what could happen from drinking untreated water in this place. Normally he'd try to forage, but none of the plants looked fully familiar, like the cat. So he hadn't dared yet, but it seemed only a matter of time. He took in a deep breath, let it out. Smelled wrong. Tasted wrong, too. Well, like his mother always said, notwithstanding. She always said it like that, too. Each component word a separate little mantra. Notwithstanding. He'd been standing long enough. Time to get on walking. Jedediah hummed to himself as his feet moved, needing something to keep them going, needing something to keep him company that wasn't a memory of his own face in the rearview mirror when his car had stalled out and his phone had given up the radio ghost for good. No signal, and before long no battery either. No bright screen, no voice from the outer reaches. A lump in his pocket, not even useful as a light. Lump in his throat, too, wouldn't go away. The creeping, gnawing anxiety from knowing almost nothing of what the near future would bring. More memory rose up, and Jed swatted it down. Nothing useful could be done with that. The road was quiet, and the forest was dark. There was a moon, and it was full, and that was fortunate, even if it was wrong like the stars. It had no face, no man in the moon, no dark craters to form the familiar illusion. Instead, its features were bright, pools and webs of silver that mirrored enough sunlight to let Jed walk along this forest-cut road without much fear of stumbling. Enough light to still see that things were wrong, even after the sun had fully set. Things like the underbrush, with its strange thorny branches bent at right angles, and the unfamiliar sounds of unknown insects. The knot crickets especially, their chirps going up and down in pitch and volume, the familiar cheep, 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 becoming cheep, cheep, cheep. And then there were the trees. They were tolerable here, but it became less so as Jed moved along, and that had been true since well before sundown. It wasn't just the gloom. The further he walked, the more they leaned in toward the road, the more their bark cracked open to see viscous drops that smelled warm and sweet and had no real color in the strange silver moonlight. This was going to be a problem, because at some point Jedediah was going to need to eat and sleep, and there was less and less space to camp by the side of the road as the forest closed in. He thought on this as his feet crunched over strange swirls of gravel, and then the crossroads became apparent in the silvery dark. The sign was the first thing Jedediah saw, because it was also the thing that was closest, that emerged first from the gloom. The thought of this burned itself into his head, because it was the first real hope he'd seen on this whole long and weary trek. A literal sign, made of grayish wood with letters burned into black. He felt his breath catch in his throat and his ears near to buckle, but he caught himself and walked on toward the sign. It was 4 signs, really, all on the same post, pointing in different directions. Too far to read just yet. Too much to hope for English? Spanish, even. Jed squinted as he neared, and then he noticed the man. The man hadn't noticed him, or maybe he had, and just wasn't letting Jed's presence deter him from what he was doing, which involved either digging something up or putting something in the ground. Certainly there was a shovel. The man was tall, a little shorter than Jed himself, and rangy, and wore a strange hat that was almost but not quite a baseball cap. The brim flat and fanning out too wide, the front stiff and high with some kind of logo. His jacket was almost a flannel, but the patterns were all diagonal crossed, and below he wore something like jeans, but they were red, and the seams seemed offset somehow. Jed was no kind of expert on clothes. His boots were brown and unremarkable. Jed took the man in as he approached, wondering, do I say something? Don't want him to feel snuck up upon, especially since he's got a shovel and I've got a pocket knife? And why am I even contemplating that possibility in the first place? But the man solved that for him. "I see you, stranger," he said, shovel not pausing its work. He did look over his shoulder at Jed, but his face was mostly cast over shadows in the unsettled dark. English, Jed thought with sudden relief. It was English. But it was English in an accent he not only couldn't place, but was positive he'd never heard before. Close to American, Southern even, but not quite. New England? No, not that either. Almost English, like the almost cat. Jed began, and so many thoughts and questions were crowding his mind that he couldn't get any single one of them out of his mouth. The man turned to face him. His face was still shadowed, but Jedediah could make out a few details. Heavy wrinkles around eyes and mouth, skin darker than Jed's own deep tan brown. A thin mouth, lips compressed in tension or disapproval, it was hard to say. Wariness, Jed decided. "What you doing on the road out to the ruin, boy? You cut through the forest? Think you could creep up on us?" Us? Jed thought. He glanced around. Another figure out in the gloom, perhaps. "Monty," the man said, "we got a boy coming up the ruin road. Best come witness." "What kind of boy?" a shrill voice called back. No, not shrill. That was uncharitable. Well used. Worn. "Not sure. If he's white, he's been out too long in the sun. Not a dusker? Part Indio, mayhap." Jed found his voice. Hi, I'm Jedediah, and my grandma was Mexican. Is Mexican? So yeah. Pleased to meet you and your wife." Even with the strange accent, the way they talked, married seemed a good enough guess. The woman, Marnie, materialized fully out of the gloom. She was tall, almost as tall as the man, with a straight, proud frame and skin just a little darker than her presumed husband's. She was wearing what Jed would have called a pioneer dress, though like the man's clothes, it wasn't quite right. The fabric had strange silver patterns sewn through the gingham, maybe? What was gingham exactly? Mayhap pleased to meet you swell, Jedediah. Depending why you're here, you come for our same find? Best not be come for that, the man said, and when Jed turned his gaze, the man had thrown back his jacket to reveal a holstered gun. Some kind of revolver, strange like everything it seemed, but unmistakably a big, lethal thing. Whoa, Jed said, and held up his arms. Backed up 2 steps. Hey man, I'm just traveling through, I guess. I'm not armed. I'm not looking for any kind of trouble. The man regarded him a long time. His eyes, Jed noticed, were gray, almost silver. Jed reached down and carefully unzipped his own jacket, a light outdoorsy thing that had been a treasured thrift store find. The man watched in apparent fascination. Fancy jacket, that? He said, and to Jed's relief his hand went nowhere near his gun. Never seen that kind of metal slide before. He's not armed, Les, the woman said. I see that, Marnie, the man replied, and visibly relaxed. Hesitated a second, then held out his right hand. Jed took it with relief, tried to squeeze firm but not too hard. The man was armed. Lazarus, still don't understand what you're doing, Jedediah, coming up the ruin road. Jedediah felt a shudder pass down his spine, ice and queasy premonition in equal measure. Ruin, he said, almost to himself. That's what that was back there? He'd been trying not to think about it this whole time. He'd mostly succeeded, because he had to keep going in the other direction. Marnie shot him a hard stare. You seen it? Jed swallowed, tried to force more saliva into his mouth to speak. I'm pretty sure I did, yeah. Lazarus stepped a little closer and leaned in to peer. Jed didn't like the searching way of that look, but the man seemed satisfied with whatever it found, if not happy about it. If he's lying, he's learned the art from the devil himself, Lazarus said. He's seen it, for sure. Marnie nodded. Speak true. Boy, Lazarus said, who are you, really? And where are you from? Hey, thanks for listening. That was the first chapter of Jedediah is a Stranger, a serial I'm writing specially for this channel. The description's got a link to my published books if you'd like to read more. And if you'd like to hear more, hit like on the video, subscribe to the channel, and subscribe to my Substack because the algorithm gods might not notify you otherwise.